So welcome to the fourth annual Lown Institute Shkreli Awards. Since 2017, we've published the Shkreli Awards as a way of shining a light on the worst examples of profiteering and dysfunction in our healthcare system. It's named, of course, for that infamous pharma bro, Martin Shkreli, the man who bought the rights to a cheap life-saving drug and jacked up the price by 5,000%. This year, we're focusing on some of the practices in healthcare that got even worse during the COVID-19 pandemic. And by the way, Martin Shkreli tried to get a furlough from prison so he could help cure COVID, but his release was denied. So we're going to do a countdown of the top 10 examples. We're going to move through these pretty quickly, so we won't be taking any questions, but the chat is open if you'd like to comment there, or you can join the conversation on Twitter at #Shkreli Awards. Vikas.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Vikas Saini, President and CEO of the Lown Institute. So why are we doing this? Well, you know, the Shkreli Awards, in our view, are not just about individual instances. It's not about bad apples. For us, it really is more of a kind of cautionary tale throughout the healthcare system. And by now it's kind of a truism that COVID-19 and the pandemic has been a massive stress test of our healthcare and public health systems. And boy, have we seen a lot of weak links thrown up into sharp relief. So that's what we're about today. And I think as we get through these, the picture that we paint will be a mosaic from a lot of different angles. So
thanks, Vikas. Thank you. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Shannon Brownlee. I'm Senior Vice President of the Lown Institute. And now I get to introduce Don Berwick. Many of you know Don Berwick. He's the President Emeritus and Senior Fellow at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. He's former Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and he's a pediatrician by background. He served on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and the Harvard School of Public Health, on the staffs of Boston Children's Hospital, Massachusetts General Hospital, and the Brigham and Women's Hospital. He's also the author of Escape Fire, which to my mind is one of the most eloquent books written about the issues facing our healthcare system. He currently serves as lecturer in the Department of Healthcare Policy at Harvard Medical School. And I have a question for you, Don. What is the funniest thing one of your grandkids has done during this period?
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks to the Lown Institute. I have 8 grandchildren, so I have to be very careful about picking one out. But
only one.
My 11-year-old, my oldest grandson, Nathaniel, asked me to teach him algebra. He's doing virtual classes right now, so I'm having to school myself in algebra right now. And I spoke with him yesterday for class number 1 and explained to him that we're going to learn this together and not separately. He's been very, very gracious. But I'll tell you, trying to get ready to teach an 11-year-old algebra has given me immense respect for teachers and all the hard work they have to do. So wish me luck with this one.
Good luck. Vikas.
Great. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mona Hanna-Attisha. She's a pediatrician, professor, and public health advocate whose research was instrumental in exposing the Flint water crisis. She's the founder and director of the Michigan State University and Hurley Children's Hospital Pediatric Public Health Initiative, which is an innovative model of public health in Flint, Michigan. She's also the author of the book, What Your Eyes Don't See, which is a powerful firsthand account of the whole story of the Flint water crisis. So Mona, for you, my icebreaker question is really, what's been keeping you busy in this quarantine? And maybe more importantly, how might you see that changing in the new year, since it's a happy new year, hopefully?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with all of you, especially my fellow pediatrician, Dr. Berwick. So I have been busy doing lots of puzzles, doom scrolling on the internet, if you can count that as a hobby or a pastime, lots of cleaning and organizing. But when Don mentioned what he was doing, I've also been very much homeschooling my children. And I also have such a huge appreciation for teachers. And I think teachers should be like the first folks to get get the vaccines because we need our kids back in school, because I cannot teach this new math either. They need to be taught by their teachers. So I'm very, very hopeful for this new year, especially with the promise of the vaccine, and hopefully with our opportunity to rebuild our healthcare system.
So Don, Mona, thank you so much for being with us. So let's get started. It's time for the countdown. We're going to go through each one and discuss them briefly with our guests. We're going to do this pretty quickly. So if you hear a ding, that's our producer telling us it's time to move on. So Shkreli Award number 10. Private equity-backed companies cut physician pay during the first COVID-19 wave, while still spending millions to protect surprise billing practices and pocketing pandemic relief dollars. So during the first wave of COVID, Team Health and Envision, which are for-profit companies that are hired by hospitals to provide physician labor, cut their doctors' pay. At the same time, these companies spent millions on political ads against surprise billing legislation. Private equity company that owns Envision also received $60 million in interest-free loans from the CARES Act. Mona, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, so you can see me shaking my head, and I'll be shaking my head for every single one of these because they are all so egregious. And I looked up a little bit about what happened here, and there was a doctor from Envision who wanted to remain anonymous because of their not being allowed to speak publicly. And this doctor said, in quotes, "They've always just been worried about the bottom line more than being appreciative of their people. Physicians don't feel like they're being heard and respected for what they do, but we still show up and take care of patients. This is part of what's breaking the system down." And I think that was stated so beautifully and so eloquently. Here is an example of an industry that is set on making profits, cutting the pay of our frontline workers who are risking their lives, working tirelessly during this pandemic, yet also, doing what they can, spending money to continue to making a profit. So this is just absolutely unacceptable.
Yep. Don, Vikas, any thoughts on this one?
If we have a deputy award on this one, we got to look at surprise billing. Out-of-pocket costs to patients have risen dramatically, even worse during the COVID pandemic, as people are finding themselves with additional burdens, and Congress has failed to act. And I think the congressional failure to deal with surprise billing, which is has onerous consequences for patients and families, deserves to be named, and it's time to fix this one.
Yeah, I got to jump in just very quickly. The only other thing I would add is that I think it's important to recognize that surprise billing is the business model for a lot of these folks. That's how they make their numbers. All right.
Hey, Don, there's a little chat here asking you to speak up a little bit louder.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
So number 9, pandemic profiteers peddle fake and potentially harmful COVID-19 cures. So televangelist Jim Baker touted silver solution, and MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell promoted botanical product oleandrin as COVID-19 cures. Now, colloidal silver has no known health benefits and can cause seizures and organ damage. Oleandrin is a biological extract from oleander plants, and it's known for its toxicity. Ingesting it can be deadly. But doctors too have jumped onto the fake COVID-19 cures bandwagon. There is Dr. Jennings Ryan Staley, who ran the Skinny Beach Med Spa in California and was indicted by the federal government for selling COVID-19 treatment packs for $4,000, consisting of hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, Xanax, and Viagra.
Viagra.
Don, what do you think?
We've got a crisis in the country in terms of confidence in science. Everything I know as a physician says we've got to use facts and science to guide what we do for patients. Our patients get hurt, costs rise without any benefit, and confusion reigns. COVID's made that worse right now because we are all learning together, and we need a very mature public to understand that we've got to navigate our way to science-based treatment, cures, prevention. When members of the medical community act irresponsibly and violate basic norms, basic rules of inference and logic and data, it hurts everybody. So this is highly irresponsible behavior. We actually need, I think, a coming together of the clinical community now around the idea that science it ought to be brought into play in order to make sure that we do the right thing for patients and with each other. So this is very destructive of an infrastructure that's crucial to our future.
I just want to jump in very briefly, and then I'd love to hear from Mona that I totally agree, Don, and I think that that the erosion of confidence in science is to some degree deserved at the moment because of some of what's been happening in the scientific community in terms of how it's being regulated by the FDA, what these kinds of things coming out, hydroxychloroquine getting the kind of huge play that it did. And I hope we can rebuild it because the science of medicine is absolutely essential, as you say. Mona, sorry, I jumped in.
Yeah, I would just add that the rebuilding of trust, as we've experienced in Flint, also there's a role for accountability and justice. So I would love to see these doctors held accountable for these lies, for the profiteering, hopefully losing their licenses and being called out. This is part of that process. A parallel example is today in Michigan, our Attorney General is going after the lawyers who lied about election fraud. So, you know, trying to get them censored, that you should not be practicing a profession if you're doing it untruthfully.
Great. So are we ready to move on to number 8? A Connecticut doctor uses town's COVID-19 testing sites to bilk residents. So a Dr. Stephen Murphy, who's an internist, ran COVID-19 testing sites for several Connecticut towns, and he used these sites to conduct unnecessary tests. One of my favorite topics, unnecessary tests. He routinely billed residents' insurers for what he called a super COVID test, including tests for 20 other respiratory pathogens, in addition to coronavirus. He also charged insurers $480 to give residents the results over the phone. These unnecessary costs led to bills for up to $2,000 per person tested. And in response to criticism, Dr. Murphy told the New York Times that just testing for coronavirus is one of the most dangerous things you could do, and that because of insurance denials, he'd been uncompensated at a cost of millions of dollars. So I'm not sure what he meant by just testing for coronavirus, but as far as I know, having an MD is not a license to steal, and this guy seemed to think that it was. Mona, any thoughts? Don, any thoughts on this one?
Public anxiety opens the door to exploitative behaviors like this, and you know, we need regulation. We also need professions that make this kind of behavior absolutely unacceptable. Even if it's legal, it's unacceptable. We've got to, again, this goes back to building public confidence in science. So this is a violation of the basic oaths that we as clinicians take and ought to stick to. I actually would go farther than that. I think at a time when the public is so anxious, it's a time to be extra generous. Not just to be restrained, but to be generous in terms of how we're dealing with the costs of what we do and helping the public instead of hurting them this way.
Yeah. Mona, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a side effect of what happens when you have a response to this pandemic that was unorganized, not coordinated, with minimal testing and, you know, minimal PPE. The list goes on of how we failed to respond to this pandemic. And when those failures happen, you have occurrences like these where people are really preying on the desperation of folks to get what they need.
Yeah.
I'll second that and link this with the last one too. I mean, in the end, these are people stepping into a vacuum to make money. And so, I mean, Xanax and Viagra, you know, to deal with COVID just says it all right there.
Oh, well, the Xanax I can kind of understand.
Well, I get the Xanax. I really don't get the Viagra. But,
yeah.
You know, I don't know. All right, number 7. Hospitals punish mask-wearing clinicians for scaring the public. In the first wave of COVID-19, clinicians at several hospitals across the US reported being suspended or fired because they insisted on wearing N95 masks and other protective equipment in the hospital. Hospitals justified these actions by saying that wearing masks was unnecessary and doing so would scare patients. Hospitals also fired or threatened to fire clinicians for speaking out on COVID-19 safety issues, such as the lack of protective equipment and long test turnaround times. So I don't know, I think things are better, but I don't know how much better they are. Any thoughts, Don, on this one?
There was, of course, confusion scientifically early in the pandemic about exactly what masks did and didn't do, but this is not responsible behavior on the part of hospitals because individuals have to make decisions about on their own as well. What I see this, though, in a larger context, a lot of my career has been spent working on patient safety. What makes any hazardous environment, including a hospital, safe? One of the Safety 101 rules, maybe one of the very first principles, is an atmosphere of openness, honesty, and disclosure in which everyone gets to speak up. If people can't speak up about things they're concerned about, systems get less safe. And smart leaders, dedicated leaders, responsible leaders don't quell, don't cool, don't chill speaking up among a workforce that's concerned. It invites them to do so and then deals very seriously with the concerns that they're raising. This is a step against safety, not just against the interests of individual physicians who want to wear masks.
I think if we extend it even further, employees have really been abandoned in this administration. OSHA's pretty much fallen asleep at the wheel, and there's workers in so many other climates that also don't have the protections they need, be it in, for example, the meat industry, the poultry industry, or what have you, that has suffered tremendously from not having the protections in place or the regulations in place to protect workers. But obviously the healthcare workers have also significantly suffered from not being fully protected and not being able to speak freely.
The other thing it points to for me is that, again, there was a lack of pandemic preparedness. But at the end of the day, when something like this happens that is novel, that is completely out of left field, in which there's no playbook, these are the kinds of crises and conditions in which leadership has to come from all directions, including the front lines and especially the front lines. A lot of what I saw in that first wave was, square pegs being tried to fit into round holes, looking at the past and trying to figure something out, but mostly thinking of it as business as usual, in which, we're your boss, you have a contract, this is a business, PR is bad. Let's focus on that instead of this is like a once in 100 years thing. We got to improvise. We got to do it fast. And everybody who has an idea has a shot at providing important ideas and leadership. So it's an extension of what you said, Don. And I think, it's important to sort of think about that in terms of grassroots leadership as well.
Well, there was also a failure of leadership at the level of the federal government because, one of the things that the lack of PPE did is exposed our fragile supply chains, our global supply chains. Yet we could have turned many industries in this country very, very quickly to creating the PPE that was needed. And we didn't. It took a long time, and that's crazy in a crisis like this. Okay, number 6. Hospital CEO pens an op-ed justifying high vaccine prices, neglecting to disclose a $487,000 conflict of interest. So in February, CEO of Brigham and Women's Hospital, Dr. Betsy Nabel, wrote an op-ed defending high drug prices as a necessity for innovation. And this is much disputed, by the way, by various sides about what you really need for innovation. But in the piece, she did not disclose her role as a member of the board of the biotech Moderna, one of the companies that was developing a COVID-19 vaccine. As a Moderna board member, Nabel received $487,500 in stock options and other payments in 2019. She's since sold $8.5 million worth of Moderna stock after the company's stock nearly quadrupled this year on news of early success with COVID-19 vaccine. In response to criticism, Nabel resigned from the Moderna board. This is a very troubling one in this sense. What she did is not illegal, and it obviously was approved by the hospital board, but it's also, it's done regularly. Hospital CEOs do this regularly. So we don't mean to pick on Dr. Nabel, but to simply point out this practice of having these kinds of conflicts of interest when you're in a position like the CEO of a hospital, and a hospital buys product all the time. So having that kind of conflict seems like it may be a problem. Mona, I'm sure you're nodding particularly vigorously, so please jump in.
Yeah, so if somebody's already followed the news, I see Nicole Keene in the chat noted that she just left her job. So a few minutes ago, Dr. Nabel has resigned as a CEO of Brigham and Women's Hospital to focus on other innovative endeavors. And in that article that notes her resignation, it shares this controversy, but as well as other controversies. And I had no idea, but she was also the advisor to the National Football League, the NFL, where she defended the league's record on safety. And in a 2016 Congressional Committee report, she said that she was part of the NFL effort to steer funding for a landmark concussion study away from the group of researchers who had previously helped establish a link between football and long-term brain injury. The Boston Globe editorial that kind of first revealed this her conflict of interest with the Moderna, being on the Moderna board. The title of that article was "When Nonprofit Medicine and Nitty-Gritty Capitalism Mix, the Potential for Financial Conflicts Abound." And I think that's so well said. There's so many conflicts of interest. Somebody else in the chat mentioned who she's also married to. She's married to the CEO, married to an executive at Sanofi. So writing an op-ed about defending the high drug prices, necessitating the need for innovation. So, definitely a conflict of interest that should have been disclosed. Like Shannon said, this is not isolated, just in the Boston area. There's so many other CEOs who are on boards of device companies, other medical companies, for-profit industries that are contributing significantly to their income. So this is just really messy. This is worse than getting a pen that says, Viagra on it. This has a lot of potential for conflicts of interest.
Well, I want to jump in and take a slightly contrarian view, only in the sense that it's not really, the issue with Nabel is not the purchasing power of the hospital as much as it is just the figurehead role and the leadership role at a major academic institution that has a lot of influence and prestige in what research gets done, what stuff gets published, all sorts of things like that. And it's really not about any individual, because this is the business model increasingly of academic medicine. Everybody wants to play that game. And the real question is, can we imagine a different world? Because we have to, I think. And that's kind of all I would say about it. There are ways of doing this, but this model was really touted and promoted, and some are better at it than others, but this model is pretty much accepted nationwide as how you function, in an academic medical center or a hospital, or interacting with industry for research dollars, et cetera.
Don, you want to share?
Yeah, I do. I want to increase a word of caution about this one. I distance myself from this particular award a little bit. Dr. Nabel is a distinguished contributor to American healthcare. She ran an NIH institute. Her contributions to well-being of patients and families and individuals in this country are massive. What she, unfortunately, in this case, she is inculpated in a systemic problem. And I don't think this is about a person. I respect Dr. Nabel a great deal. I think that we happen to have a financing system in healthcare in which normal people, good people, put in certain positions will behave in ways that we then, in retrospect, say are unwise and ill-judged. I don't want to make that judgment about Dr. Nabel. I don't think she should have done what she did, but I wasn't in her shoes. But I think we need to fix this. This has to be viewed as contextual, not individual. We have to be able to change the way we're financing care so people aren't put in a position where they're tempted to do what we're here calling out on behalf of an individual. So to me, this is about a systemic issue that's severe, not an individual.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yep.
Vikas?
Well, speaking of other types of systemic issues, so number 5, Big Pharma rejects a global effort to cooperate on COVID-19 and competes for their profits instead. Pharmaceutical giants AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson condemned the concept of a COVID-19 technology access pool, or CTAP as its promoters call it, which would be a voluntary scheme to share information, including trial data and patent rights, to more easily develop and distribute coronavirus treatments, vaccines, and diagnostics. Quote, I think it is nonsense. And at this point of time, it's also dangerous, unquote, said Dr. Albert Bourla, chief executive of Pfizer. So let me kick it off. So for me, the striking thing about this is not really Dr. Bourla's quote, because that's sort of a standard view about what business should do and how private enterprise should operate, which is with minimal interference. And, we are, or to put it a different way, we're not a charity, we're an operating business, and that's our job. And this is nuts. I mean, I sort of get the point of view, but what I'm most struck by is the kind of historical blindness or tone deafness, or however you want to put it, a pandemic that is roiling the entire world, every single country. I mean, in my lifetime, I can't imagine seeing, quiet streets, mask wearing, across billions and billions of people in the world. This is different. And to not be able to acknowledge that and consider for a moment that this might be an occasion to suspend some of those rules and really do things to make it more efficient, faster, more integrated, I just think is really poorly thought out. Now, I think the dangerous part is interesting, because I think the worry is, well, if this is a slippery slope, if they can do it for COVID, where would they do it next? Which is a valid debate we should have. Mona, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree, especially when a lot of this work is being financed by the public. It's been financed by government, many of it, not all of it. And so there should be the levers in place to allow for greater collaboration to get this work done. But if you take a step back, like I have been so impressed this last year by the global scientific community, the sharing, the reporting, the articles that have come out, the speed of the knowledge that has been brought on by this global community of science. So that has been phenomenal, and it's been wonderful to see so many people working together to figure this out. But any efforts to kind of make that easier, I think, should be enhanced.
By the way, there's an interesting question in the chat. We're financing those specific pharmaceutical companies. Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, in general, a huge amount of drug and drug work in particular is done on the public dime, but in this particular case, the public did finance a great deal of the research and the R&D for Moderna, I think almost entirely, didn't it? I don't know. I don't remember which one it is.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I think.
We are going to see globally severe problems in the supply chain for the drugs and treatments and tests that emerge in the COVID pandemic and future such global threats. What would it be like if we were a world in which a company like Pfizer or Moderna, or the next company that develops a really great breakthrough, says, on behalf of the well-being of the human race, we will make this intellectual property available to anyone that wants it? What if we just change that game for a while and create a legend that this was a time when corporations acted like individuals should, which is with absolute generosity? I might even argue that in the long run, shareholders might be better off, although that's not the reason to do it. But I think the concept of bottling up knowledge that could save millions and millions and millions of lives, I don't think there's an economics theory that would withstand the moral scrutiny behind that stand.
And that, this is a really deep question and an important one, a philosophical question about what's the best way to make sure that the most people get access to things that they need, that we haven't answered very well, have we?
Not at all. And if you want to read a book, what Ezra Klein calls the best book of the year, it's The Ministry for the Future. And it takes everything we just talked about and maps it over to climate change. And it makes a lot of sense.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Now we're moving on to what? Number 4. Nursing homes fail to protect the most vulnerable Americans from COVID-19. So for years, nursing homes across the U.S. have been inadequately staffed, leading to infections, medical errors, and neglect. The lack of proper staffing, oversight, and support for nursing homes have tragically made some of these institutions hotspots for COVID-19 outbreaks. For example, leaders of Soldiers Home Veterans Nursing Home in Holyoke, Massachusetts, decided to combine the COVID-19 unit with the other dementia unit because they were low on staff. This allowed the virus to spread rapidly and killed 76 residents and staff. As of late November 2020, more than 100,000 nursing home residents and staff have died from COVID-19 in the US. Now, I see this one as kind of a complicated one that stems ultimately from the fact that we as a nation have not exactly figured out how best to take care of people who are frail and elderly and injured. But Mona, talk to us about this.
Yeah, so the last book I just read, I finished it a couple of days ago, is a book called American Dementia, and it's about to come out. So I was pre-reading the book, and it was really by and large about the failure that we have had as a nation to support our seniors, and the growth of for-profit nursing homes is part of that failure, where we have an explosion of these nursing homes with understaffed, minimal resources, low-paying workers with minimal benefits, minimal resources, and that aren't, they're not treating our seniors as they should in the best settings possible. So it really kind of reflects on this capitalistic greed of this industry, the nursing home industry, and our, once again, as you said, Shannon, failure, our national failure to figure out what to do with our seniors. So this is not surprising that the nursing homes have failed our seniors, where we've seen such tremendous loss and misery, loneliness, and despair in this pandemic and the spread of the virus. So I think, it really reflects, these awards not only reflect on kind of the greed of our healthcare industry, but also in this specific industry of nursing homes, which are not working. And I hope that COVID also gives us an opportunity to rethink as a nation how we take care of some of our most vulnerable residents.
This is another case where individual cases may not yet reveal the overall pattern of defect. Our whole national strategy for dealing with aging and the aged is broken. We do not have congressional or, up to this point, even executive branch leadership on this. Not to excuse real malfeasance in nursing homes, anyone on this call who was handed a nursing home under current circumstances and told to run it right would have a very, very difficult time doing that, because the overall funding stream, for profit or not for profit, is inadequate. The way we treat the staffs of nursing homes at minimum wage level, many without benefits, you'd not expect excellence to emerge when a workforce is treated that way. So this is a matter of public finance as well as private, and we're going to have to decide over time if we really going to develop a national plan for dealing with aging. I was recently, before COVID, in Taiwan, seeing a development of a total national plan on aging, which is quite impressive. Same in Singapore, where they now have on the drawing boards a plan for dealing with aging. We need one in this country as well. Oh,
do we ever? As the child, my mother died in an assisted living facility in November, and I think one of the hardest parts for so many in nursing homes and these other facilities has been loneliness. Terrible, terrible loneliness. And and that's just one piece of the kind of craziness of the way we've set this up, and it's been exacerbated by COVID. So yeah, well, the president-elect has a lot on his plate if he's going to fix that system.
Well, I mean, I think we should be reassured. Dr. Vivek Murphy, our new and old Surgeon General's committed to loneliness. He wrote a book on loneliness, and there's some really innovative efforts happening about with putting intergenerational homes, or having nursing homes with preschools and all these other efforts to combat loneliness, which is really a win-win for both populations, but really can only happen post-COVID.
Yes. Yes.
Mona, I'm delighted you're on, because you're saying things that I was about to say, and that was one of them. But let me extend it a little further by adding, the whole way we think about aging needs a rethink. And certainly the institutional level and the financing and all the things that Don talked about are absolutely spot on. What we really need is a reimagining of what communities look like and what aging in place looks like, and how the institutions and the home and the neighborhoods are integrated. It's a challenge, no doubt, but I think everybody would be happier if we could move in that direction. Great.
Vikas, I think you're up.
Yeah, so we're down to the final three. Bronze, silver, and gold, if you want to think that way. So here's number 3. Hospitals with extra beds refuse to take uninsured patients from overrun neighboring hospitals. 4 major hospital systems in California refused to take COVID-19 patients or delayed transfers from hospitals that were out of beds, an investigation from the Wall Street Journal found. Internal emails showed that hospitals refused or delayed transfers based on patients being uninsured, on Medicaid, or other insurance-related reasons. Some of these hospitals had 120 or more ICU beds available. So, as my kid would say, I can't even. Look, this illustrates so much, but fundamentally, a fractured financing system, multiple insurance models, some of which pay more than others, some of which are more attractive than others, as well as a lack of any integrated regional capacity and planning on our hospital sector. As I said at the outset, this COVID pandemic is a massive stress test, and this illustrates it. This is an intersection of a business as usual mindset with an unbelievably historic crisis of major proportions. I mean, can one imagine, a city ravaged by hurricanes or fires or floods and having some hospitals say, no, go down the street? The mindset is so old school, and it's got to change. But I think this is one of those things where it's going to take a comprehensive reorganization of things, both at the funding side. I mean, this is a case where an integrated single payer model would absolutely help. It wouldn't solve it, but it would help, as would much more serious regional coordination and integration of hospitals and hospital capacity. That's my opinion. I'm sure there are others. When we looked at this in the Lown Institute Hospitals Index, which we published this July, we saw in every city, some hospitals really are oriented to certain populations and certain insurance types, and others are others. And this is well known to anybody who knows about healthcare. So this is not news. What's news is, in the midst of such a pandemic, to continue that sort of behavior is mind-boggling.
Called the wallet biopsy. You do the wallet biopsy before you make the decision to admit.
Yeah, this is more than the proverbial wallet biopsy.
Okay, moving on to Don. Excuse me.
Yeah, one other quick comment here. Again, this pandemic won't be the last one we see, and it won't be the last 21st century threat. And there is a lot of very good work done on how to prepare for global issues like this. One of them is we've got to share resources, and regional and supra organizational responses matter a lot. What we know, in fact, I co-chaired an effort at the National Academy of Medicine pre-COVID on this, is that the ability of the private sector to cooperate across boundaries is deficient. The habits aren't there. Sometimes it's been working, but a lot of times we aren't able to share the data, the resources, the supply chains regionally that are going to be necessary to deal with 21st century threats. That kind of structure has to be set up, and culture has to change so that the first order of business is cooperation.
Yeah. So there are regulatory hurdles there too that have to be cleared out of the way, as well as,
That's correct.
You know,
That's correct.
this is what we've done always, practice.
But I mean, I think that also really speaks to the deficiency of our public health infrastructure at every level of government. Our public health infrastructure to be able to do this regional level work and local, state, and national level work has been, you know, disinvested in, and you know, is out of date. So we need a lot more resources at those levels to create, you know, technology compatibility and the ability to get that population level data so that we can act in a very timely way.
And, you know, I have to second what you said, Don, and underline something, which is, you know, we're going to continue, sadly, and it's unfortunate, but we're going to continue to face challenges of this order of magnitude, I believe, in the coming decades. And if not from pandemics, from climate change. So this is not a one-off, and we have to start changing how we think about these things.
All right. Number 2, back to vaccines. A drug company relies on $1 billion in taxpayer funding to develop COVID-19 vaccine, and then sets the highest price of any vaccine maker. So in August, the biotech company Moderna set an estimated price for its COVID-19 vaccine at $32 to $37 per dose. For some customers, the vaccine requires 2 doses. So this price was higher than any other COVID vaccine thus far, even though 100% of Moderna's development costs were covered by the US government. Since Moderna was nominated for this award, their lower bound for vaccine price has declined, in part due to public scrutiny like this that you see on your screen. People are demonstrating, saying free the vaccine. Moderna's CEO clarified in November that they'll charge the government $25 to $37 per dose, depending on the amount ordered. Although the US has placed an order for $1.5 billion worth of doses at a discount price of $15 a dose, given the upfront investment by the US government, we are essentially paying for the vaccine twice. Now, once again, this is not illegal, and it's also not that unusual that the federal government pays for a great deal of research, and the final development process is done by the drug companies. Now, certainly doing clinical trials, which is often what the drug companies are doing mostly, is expensive, but we, the people, are effectively paying twice for many, many, many drugs, not just this particular vaccine, where we're paying through our taxes for the basic research through the NIH, and then we're paying again to the companies. It's sort of a case of public risk and private gain. And I think that we need to rethink this whole model as well, which is, why is it that we basically say we will pay for the upfront development research piece of it, and then hand it over to a company to basically produce? There are other models out there that might work just as well, and in fact might be just as innovative as what we've got right now. Don, Mona, Vikas, any thoughts on this one?
Well, you know, I mean, I think about it from a business point of view, and I'm thinking, you know, $1 billion of free product development money is a gift. And, you know, if on the face of it, you know, you're a private enterprise and you said, I want to develop this vaccine and I need capital to do it, whoever gave you that billion would typically get a piece of the company. So, and I don't know what the value of Moderna was. It was publicly traded, so you could look this up, but I don't know what the value of Moderna was before this announcement, but I suspect $1 billion of investment would have bought you a chunk of the company, if, you know, the public a chunk of the company. So if you want to think about it from a business point of view, it also doesn't make sense. This is really a form of socialism, but a weird form of socialism.
Don, you had
Yeah,
something?
I mean, how much money is enough? I mean, I say we have to credit that whatever dynamics work to produce vaccines at impressive pace, and if there's not immune breakout, we're going to be very grateful that this happened. But how much money is enough? Maybe there needs to be some real sense of discipline and public spirit here that goes way beyond what any of these companies are yet doing. The other thing of greater concern to me, even than that, is the global South. I think that this country can take two positions with respect to what it's produced: isolationism, and we come first. Or you can say we're part of a human pattern of suffering right now. We've got to contribute, and if the private sector can't do that, they need to be encouraged to do that. And I hope that goes well.
Yeah, I want to add, I'm sort of pleased to see this on the list because I want to say I'm just immensely grateful for the fact that we have a vaccine and that their vaccine is so effective. And the same for the other companies. So, I don't want to sound churlish. It's not about that. That is a good thing. The question is under what terms, and in what way, shape, or form. And I think in this instance, the Trump administration, kind of didn't study the art of the deal properly.
Right. Well, because you now have the honor of numero uno, the winner of them all.
All right. Well, I'm having a little Zoom glitch, so you'll have to give me a second. Here we are. So, number one, the federal PPE task force gives life-saving supplies to private companies to distribute, creating a bidding war and delays in the distribution of equipment. In late March, FEMA's Personal Protective Equipment Procurement Task Force, led by Jared Kushner, launched Project Airbridge to airlift PPE from overseas and bring it to the US quickly. And to their credit, they did that. But rather than distribute the PPE to the states, FEMA gave these supplies to 6 private medical supply companies to sell to the highest bidder, creating a bidding war among the states. According to FEMA, 50% of the supplies were meant to go to designated pandemic hotspots, but no officials from the 10 hardest hit counties in the first COVID wave could confirm that they received any PPE from Project Airbridge. In many cases, federal agencies outbid states on PPE orders or seized supplies that states had purchased, making it much harder and more expensive for states to get PPE in desperate times. And I remember how desperate it was in that phase. Don?
Well, there are at least two prominent problems here. Aside from the rage this brings to one's mind, one is simply technical, which is what is the distribution system that we're going to set up that will help make sure that help gets where it's needed. This country lacked a plan. It lacked, and still does, and hopefully we'll have one very soon. But you need a sense of management and organization and planfulness to deal with the constant threat of chaos that a crisis like this induces. When that doesn't happen, the door goes wide open for this kind of exploitative, confiscatory behavior. It's extremely harmful. But you've got to look to leadership for failure to have a plan. The second is a values system, which I sometimes hesitate to raise because it may sound odd for our country, but it's the value of solidarity. Is this nation capable of acting with a sense of solidarity? Only that is going to beat this 15-gene virus. And the countries that have evinced that have said we're one place, we're going to come together as a nation, and we're going to do the job we all need to do together, and has a government willing to lead in that and speak to that, and leaders willing to sign on, those are the ones that are successful in this pandemic era. We have not been. So there's an underlying question here, because about what I'll call American solidarity. We appear able to mobilize that sometimes in wartime. When you watch what FDR did, bringing the nation along to finally get us the readiness we lacked for World War II, the nation came together. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, but it happened. The fact that we've been unable to do that in the pandemic is costing us hundreds of thousands of lives, and we've got to address this as a matter of national values.
Thanks, Don. I agree completely. And maybe, you know, I have my eye on the clock. Those are great sentiments to help us reflect and wrap up this whole program today. I think, you know, those are the key questions, but Mona, let me give you a couple minutes to talk about this one and then all of them. What actually does this panorama of cases say about our healthcare system? And what would have to happen so that we wouldn't have Shkreli Awards next year?
I love what Don just said, and that's something that keeps me up at night. Why don't we care as much about our neighbors? And why do we care so much about ourselves? How do we shift from individualism to collectivism, where we are doing things for each other? That's so much of kind of what got me into this work. What opened my eyes in Flint, where Flint was a place where nobody wanted to look at. That's those people over there. That's not my kids. They don't look like me. I'm going to close my eyes and look away. How do we get to a place where we all open our eyes to what's happening to our neighbors and our loved ones? And that's, you know, I love the mention of American solidarity. How do we get to a point of we? Where we care for each other, not just in healthcare, but in our greater society. And I want to end my words with hope, because that's a lot of who I am. I see hope in these situations. We are in this generation-defining moment of crisis as a nation, but I also see it as an incredible opportunity to finally open our eyes to these egregious, greedy examples that are systemic in this industry, and not only be awake to what we are seeing, but to finally take action to make sure that this really is the last time that we have to do these awards.
And I want to echo the sense of hope. I have a 25-year-old son who has a bunch of friends, and I just look at these kids and I think, wow, you are thinking so much outside yourself. When I was your age, I was mostly thinking about me, and you're thinking about things that are bigger than just yourselves. And that gives me tremendous hope that we will eventually be able to do it. And we're going to need a lot of leadership. Don's provided a lot of that in the healthcare system. Mona, you've provided that in public health. You know, we hope that in some ways that the Shkreli Award, by shining a light on the not so good, is also an opportunity to think about the heroes. And there are lots and lots of them out there in healthcare. There are lots and lots of them out there in public service. So thank you both for being with us. Vikas, do you have any final thoughts before I wrap up?
Well, I mean, I also agree with the sentiments that Don expressed. And I just want to highlight that, you know, this country has, and will come together and solve these problems, but it's not going to just happen by itself. It does take effort. And I think nobody should, and I think nobody has illusions, but nobody should have illusions that it's going to be easy, because it's not. You know, there are a lot of things going on in healthcare and in the broader society that are serious, serious challenges. But, you know, it feels to me like this is one of those moments, one of those historical moments. And by that, it's not this week or this month, but I think this year and the coming years are a pivotal point for us, whether it's on pandemics or healthcare writ large or democracy or climate change. We can tackle these things, and I think we will. You know, the Shkreli Awards really paint a picture of dysfunction, but what they do is they point to all the spots where were we to systematically tackle these things and make it not about individual cases or bad apples, but how we can make a better system. I think that vision would be incredibly inspiring for people, and that's kind of the task for us, for all of us. So, you know, it's sometimes disheartening, sometimes shocking, sometimes even a little amusing to read these stories mostly from journalism. So I think journalists deserve a lot of credit for unearthing these stories, but I think there's a lot more down the road that's going to get better, and I think we'll get there.
So with that, thank all of you out there for joining us, and a special thank you to Don and Mona. Really, we really appreciate everything you do, not just showing up on this show, but everything you've done for healthcare and public health. If others out there are interested in getting healthcare news like this in your inbox, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which is at thelowninstitute.org/subscribe. It's the Lown Weekly. And join us for our next event on January 27th, where we'll be chatting with healthcare policy experts about hospital collaboration in COVID-19 and beyond. We touched on that. We talked about the California hospitals not taking COVID patients. There are examples of cooperation among hospitals. What's it going to take for hospitals to really work cooperatively to make sure that the populations they serve are well served? You can register at lowninstitute.org/presents. I hope to see you there. And thanks again to Mona and Don and everyone for joining us.